Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I've got a really fun and colorful project for you. We are going to draw this cupcake in alcohol markers. Of course, you can draw your cupcake in whatever you want, and you can use whatever medium you want to color it, but I was feeling like working with markers today. I'm starting off by sketching with a gray Prismacolor Col Erase color pencil. I love to use a Col Erase color pencils underneath my alcohol marker work for sketching because they're not super waxy, so they're not going to damage my markers when I color over them, and also they're erasable. So if I make a mistake, if I have extra lines, I usually draw pretty, I guess pretty scribbly and sketchy when I begin, and then I refine. So I can erase some of those scribbly lines if I don't need them. I can also choose a tone that's going to be similar to what I'm going to end up coloring, so those lines just kind of disintegrate as I color over them with markers. That's one of the nice things about wax, is that alcohol marker will break it down, but the Col Erase are not super waxy, so they're not gonna like clog up the tips of my markers. And I will be using a brush tip marker today. I'll be using the new 90 set of Arctic's Oros markers, and I'll have a review on them tomorrow on my YouTube channel if you want to check them out. So this cupcake was really pretty. It was a photograph I found on Unsplash, and I'll try to remember to link it down below. It was actually a photo of a whole table full of these cupcakes, and I just cropped down to one of them when I was sketching, so it would kind of let me zoom in and not be too confusing with all the other ones there. The thing that was neat about this cupcake was that it looked like the cupcake had been baked and then put inside a rainbow wrapper, so you've got all those really nice, like accordion crinkled edges. You have some really nice crisp colors, because a lot of times when you bake a cupcake in the cupcake wrapper, the cupcake color seeps through. So these were obviously put into a wrapper after they were baked, but there is still some little crinkles and interesting imperfections in the little folds of the flutes of the cupcake wrapper that I thought were really neat, and I wanted to make sure I captured them. Also, there's a nice pile of piped icing. I love to draw and color icing, and there are sprinkles and other little embellishments on the cupcakes that I thought was really pretty, along with a pick that has the rainbow. And man, I would love to find those. Those would be so cute to do for a party. Anyway, I thought this was such a cheerful cupcake, and I thought it would make a really great illustration. I wanted to choose something that I could draw pretty much with the colors in that Arctic's Oros 90 set. Now this is the third set that they've released in this line of markers, which is a chisel tip on one end, a brush tip on the other, and their 80 set's kind of like an all-around set, no grays though, but a great selection of colors. Then they have the 36 skin tone set, and then they have this 90 set. So the 90 set is more to fill in the gaps that are not in the 80 set. It's so you can kind of collect all the colors without getting duplicates, which I really like. But this set I don't think is a great one to start with if you don't have any other markers, because it severely lacks midtones, and you'll see I had to actually grab a couple colors from my 80 set to be able to get a green and an orange that was kind of like a midtone, because they are not available in that set. So I just wanted to put that out there in case you're wondering what the difference is between the 90 set and the 80 set. They're all different colors except for colorless blenders, and I think there's a black in each set. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure you knew that, so you weren't starting off with the 90 set. I don't think that's the best way to go. Although there's gorgeous ranges of grays there, not having the midtones is kind of tough. So I started in by blocking in the pastel colors. When I'm working on kind of a delicate subject with some bright colors like this, but I still need highlights, I will often start with my pastel tones, because I know I can build up my darks and get the colors I need that way. So that's why I'm doing this. You could also, shift the color scheme here and go with a low contrast pastel pastel color scheme. I think that would be really pretty as well. Pastels are so popular right now, and this does have a beautiful range of pastel tones. So if you had the set of just kind of assorted, say you had like a set of Sharpies or something, and you're like, oh, I wish I had some pastels to go with it, maybe some more earth tones, this would be a great set to add to a pack of Sharpies, for instance. But if you had just any of the random budget sets, you may get a lot of overlap. I'm not exactly sure. I just know there's no overlap with the original 80 set that they put out. So as you can see, as I'm putting down that darker red, see how I'm leaving some of the lighter pink showing through at the edges? Those little, the kind of points on each of the flutes of the cupcake wrapper, they're catching light. So they're gonna be a little bit lighter. And as you get in the crease of each of the cupcake flutes, that's where you're gonna have more shadow. So that's where I'm putting those darker tones. Now the nibs on these brushes, and I'm gonna go over a lot of this. I've done a review on these, on this line of markers, and I will go into this a little bit more in depth tomorrow on the review. If you're watching this the day it comes out, this will be out on like the 17th, and the review will be out on the 18th, I think, or maybe I don't know. I'm recording this a couple days in advance. I don't know my days. I don't have a calendar in front of me. This is one of the greens I had to grab from another set just because I didn't have a good mid-tone green. You can see my swatch there on the side of the camera. We've got a fluorescent green. We've got 3 real dark greens, actually 4 quite dark greens, and then we've got some pastels, so I really needed that mid-tone there. But you got your shadows within the creases or the crevices of the flutes, and then you got the highlights at the tips of the flutes. And those shaky lines that I have like halfway down the cupcake wrapper, those are some little dents and imperfections, which I thought were great. I love to find those imperfections in subjects and kind of focus on them, because that's what makes things look real. It's not the perfection, it's the imperfections that give you that sense of reality. And you really want to look for those when you're working from a reference. I think that's when, like when I'm working from my imagination, a lot of times I don't think to put in those imperfections. I try to make everything as perfect as can be. So that's why working from a reference can be really helpful, because it shows you sides of things that you might not think up. You know, your brain, I think, thinks in more terms of black and white and perfect and complete, but you'll see broken things or torn edges or textures that you wouldn't necessarily recall from your memory. So that's why I'm a fan of using references. And then it will make your work that you do from your imagination more believable, because you'll have more visual vocabulary. You will have stockpiled so much more visual information by sketching things from reference or from real life, because it really forces you to look at the object and not draw what you think you see or what you think it looks like. The inside of the wrapper is a lot lighter than the outside of the wrapper, so that's something to consider as you're sketching. Now, I love when you can start to see a drawing come together and you're starting to see the, like I left the pastel tones on the inside of the wrapper because that's kind of believable. That's what you would see, the light shining through that thin paper. You would see some of that color that's printed on the outside of the wrapper, that little like bleed through of color. I'm also using grays to add shadow, and I really did see that on my reference photo, which was really helpful. And that's one thing I like about this set of markers, is that there's a full range of warm grays and cool grays. And then there's a couple assorted green grays and blue grays, which personally I haven't really found a good use for. If you're a marker artist and you use the blue grains and green blah blah blah, I can't say green grays, that's hard to say. If you use your blue grays and green grays a lot, will you please let me know in the comments below what you use them for? Because I mean, I'll use them sometimes, but honestly I usually use them for backgrounds, because I don't tend to use those colors very often, so they're always really juicy. So when I need to fill in a background, a lot of times I'll use a blue gray or a green gray just to, you know, use it for something. So if you guys have any tips for me, I would love to hear it. I don't use markers all the time, so I'm still learning, just like you, just like everyone, and I would love to put those to better use. I might be just missing something, you know, like, what? You didn't know you're supposed to use it for this? You know, it could be I'm just missing something. I've never taken like graphic design classes or anything, so if you have a good idea for them, just let me know. I'm also going ahead and putting in the rainbow. I like to skip around on my drawings because it gives you a chance to give your eyes a break from what you've been working on, because sometimes you can be going down a wrong path in your artwork and everything looks fine to your brain, and then you walk away and you come back and you look at it and you're like, oh, I completely did that wrong, or it doesn't look right. So by just jumping around to different parts of your illustration, it can give your eyes a little bit of a break and a perspective, and just it allows you to step back from them a little bit, from an area a little bit, so that when you come back you're seeing it a little more true. Another way to do that is to flip your work upside down. Also take a photo of it with your phone and then look at the photo, or look at your artwork in a mirror. All those tips can help you look at your work with new eyes, especially if you don't have the time to take a break, or maybe you don't want to take a break because you've got an hour to do art and you don't want to waste any of it. So that will work too. Sorry for getting my head in there. As you can see, I'm in my normal hobo attire of no makeup, sweatshirt, and glasses. See, I never have to worry about being recognized in public because I always look like a hobo. I'm base coating the icing now. I'm using a really, really soft pink. There are so many beautiful pastel shades in this 90 set. I really like the pastel shades with alcohol markers because, especially when you're working on a more thirsty absorbent paper like this is I'm working in the Ohuhu marker pad. And it's kind of an absorbent paper. You can see on the page to my right that my hand is resting on, you can see that bleed through from the artwork on the opposite side. This is not a slick marker paper like some artists like to use. I prefer something that's got a little bit of absorbency because that helps you blend. When you're working on marker paper, it does conserve, like a slick marker paper, it does conserve your ink a little bit more, but you get more harsh edges, and I find it a little bit more difficult to build up a nuanced, more shaded and realistic look. Personally, everyone's got their favorites. I think you should use whatever you like to use. I do enjoy the Sketchbook though for markers. I also like the Render Sketchbook. That one is not very forgiving though. It's just something to keep in mind. I actually have that on my fun art desk upstairs near the balcony, so that's what I use up there. But I have done tutorials in the Render book too. If you're interested, I'm trying to think. I bet if you searched RENDR on my channel, it would bring up the tutorials using that Sketchbook because that's the only render paper I have, and that's such a weird word that I think it would just bring up the Sketchbook Sundays where I use that. So now what I'm doing is throwing in my darker shadows. I think I used number 8. I don't know if it's called Rose. Maybe it's called Rose Pink or something like that. It's kind of like it's a really beautiful red. It's a very soft, cool, tame red. And then I'm blending that out with the pink just to kind of soften it a bit. I will need to use some gray in that icing because it's just a little too saturated, and the color does need to be desaturated in the shadows. But I tend to wait to do that towards the end just to make sure and give my eyes a break. Like I'm working on this section of the Cupcake pick where it's got the little toothpick, and the toothpick going into the little paper topper there, and I'm just kind of getting the highlights and all of that jazz in there. I think I angled the pick a little bit too much. It's definitely more angled than it was in the reference photo, but hey, I'm going with it, I just keep going with it. And I'm erasing some of my lines that I thought weren't quite poofy enough. That's a technical term, right? I use the colorless blender, the chisel end. I really like using the chisel end of the colorless blender to erase mistakes. I added some of the rainbow colors not smoothly against that cloud edge, so I was able to erase it with the clear marker. And then you can clean stuff up with the white gel pen as well. And you don't have to worry about using the white gel pen on top of marker. It's going to bond just fine. I know with colored pencil, you want to be careful if you want the work to be archival. You want to use an archival product for your whiting, but on marker, you're basically just using pen on paper because the ink in the marker just kind of absorbs into the paper and dries. So you really haven't affected the integrity of the paper. So using a gel pen or a Posca pen is going to be fine, or gouache, whatever you want, bleed-proof white, whatever is your most convenient thing, whatever you prefer is fine. We'll get to that later, but there's no problem with archivability with that. As long as your pen's acid-free, your paper's acid-free, you're going to be fine. So I'm just coloring in the little decorations, the sprinkles, the toppers. I love this sort of embellishment. It's a lot of fun. Making spheres is really fun. You just kind of color it with a lighter shade and then go around one of the edges with a darker shade, and it just makes it look three-dimensional. I just think it's so satisfying to draw things like that. And then the little sprinkles and little tiny pearls are just dots with the brush tip marker. The brush tips on these are reversible like the Ohuhu markers. I don't feel like these are quite as juicy as the Ohuhu markers. Ohuhu are very juicy, in fact, to the point where you have to be careful uncapping them. You don't want to uncap them over your work or you'll get a little bit of a spray. These do not feel that juicy. Just for a little bit of point of reference anyway. But I haven't had any issues with any of my Artix markers drying out on me. I did have one really light color, and I actually pulled the tip and flipped it around because I think that the brush tip might not have been touching the pad internally inside the marker that holds the ink. But then after I did that, it worked fine. So these are reversible nibs, so if you do get a situation where you've frayed your nib, you can pull it out and reinsert it backwards, and the other end of the brush tip is will be nice and new and fresh. So that's nice because these are a compressed fiber type of nib. They're not a foam rubber nib, so they are going to be a little bit more prone to fraying. I asked the folks at Artix if they were going to be offering open stock markers or refills or replaceable nibs, and they said yes, they will offer at least one of those options. I'm hoping that it's well, I guess it really doesn't matter because you can use the Altenew nibs on this marker body, and the Altenew nibs are actually higher quality. They're about $2 a nib, so they're not cheap, but they are Copic quality. And the inks match the Art and Fly numbering system and also the Shinhan numbering system. So you can buy refill inks from those companies and refill your markers going by the color number. And I noticed by color name, a lot of the Copic colors match these colors by name, but you've got to save your swatch sheets to get the names because there's only numbers printed on the caps. So as long as you have your swatch sheets, you can match up a lot of the colors. The only discrepancy, like the skin tones were perfect matches. A lot of the pastels were perfect matches, but as you got into the brighter colors, I found that they're lemon and they're bright yellow. Those were not matches. So, I would kind of eyeball it too. If it doesn't look like it's going to be a good match, then obviously don't do it. But, I'm all for anything that can bring a little extra life into your markers because the build quality of these markers are beautiful. They're comfortable to hold. They're a triangular barrel. So they're non-roll, which is really nice. And I love the matte gray finish on them. So I think that nowadays there is really a marker for every artist. Find something that's going to be comfortable in your hand. I kind of wish they would offer open stock because then somebody could buy one and see how it feels in their hand. They could buy a marker from each range and see, gee, do I like a round barrel? Do I like an oval barrel? Do I like a triangular barrel? What do I prefer? Some people might like the chunkier round barrels like Pro Marker, Prismacolor, the Ohuhu brush. Some people might like the oval barrels like the Ohuhu Classic, the Blick Studio, or the Copic Sketch. Everyone's got their own preferences. I have rather small hands and I generally prefer the oval barrels, but I find these triangular ones also very easy to hold. And the one thing I did notice on these markers is that there weren't any of the chisel nibs seated wrong, and there's another brand of marker that uses the same body. It's the Artify, and while they're, same nibs, same body, I found that their chisel nibs, like many of them, were not put in an ergonomic fashion. You go to color with them and it was so awkward because the nibs were so inconsistently placed that I felt like I would have to pull out a third of them and reinsert them to be ergonomic, which I didn't have this issue at all with the Oros markers. Or the Altenew markers that use the same body. The Altenews are more expensive. They have a nicer brush nib, but they are more expensive. And they have their own color system. There are I think that the Artify and Altenew might use the same color system. I wrote it down once. You can refer to any of those reviews if you want the skinny. Sometimes I forget information because I have so many different marker sets that I use. Now I'm using the white gel pen to add some highlights. It just brings it a little bit... it brings things a little bit more of a finished quality, I think, when you go in with a little gel pen. And I'm just kind of adding a little bit of a darker gray here and there where I feel like I need some darker values. And now I decided, well, maybe I'll take a dark gray color pencil and maybe increase the contrast a little bit more. I like this. What I wish I did, though, I wish I went over it with a gray marker to kind of take some of the grain out, because after I photographed these, I could see a little bit of the color pencil grain. You know how you can see the grain of the paper with colored pencil when you're just using a real light. I saw that and I'm like, I should have just used a fine liner, or I should have went in with the marker on top of it to kind of dissolve that pencil a little bit. But all in all, I'm really pleased with how this came out. It was really fun. It was a fun project to do, and I don't know what it is about drawing sweets and cupcakes and things like that. I don't have much of a sweet tooth myself, but I just love the way that like fluffy icing looks. I love the texture of cakes and syrupy things and chocolates and stuff like that. I just find it a very appealing type of subject to draw. Isn't that funny? We all have the things we like to draw, and I don't know, I like to draw flowers and I like to draw confections, I guess. There's just something sweet about them, I guess. Well, I hope you enjoyed this project. I really enjoyed enjoy creating it. My head's in the way, sorry about that. As you can see, I'm tweaking some of the shadows. Actually, this is a black. I went in just for the super darks to write the blacks and also to sign my name. I hope you enjoyed this, and I want to thank you so much for watching today. Please give me a thumbs up before you go, and until next time, happy crafting.